Hi everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath, Senior Editor at Forbes. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has engaged in a marathon speech Thursday morning to register his disapproval of the GOP budget bill. As of this interview, he is still speaking, seemingly going for Congress's record. When he finishes talking, the House will take up a vote. And joining us to discuss all of this is Congressman Mike Levin, a representative for California's 49th District. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maggie. Good to be with you.
This is an ever-evolving situation, but it does seem like this bill will pass as soon as Hakeem Jeffries finishes speaking. What is your first message to your constituents after it passes?
Well, the first thing I want to say is just thank you to everybody that has been in this fight with us, who has called senators and representatives all across the country. Know that we have done everything humanly possible, being in the minority party, to try to stand up and fight for our values, to fight for health care, to fight for food for people who need it, to fight for our seniors and our veterans and our children, to fight for lower energy bills, and ultimately to fight for fiscal sanity, where we're not blowing a massive hole in our nation's debt that we'll never be able to recover from. That being said, it's extraordinarily disappointing, Maggie, because behind closed doors, so many of my Republican colleagues have acknowledged what a bad piece of legislation this is, both the process and the final product. And they're voting for it despite that, basically to please one man, Donald Trump, as opposed to doing what they know to be right for their constituents back in their home states. So it's a sad day in my view. I think that this is the single worst piece of legislation I've ever seen in my career.
You just said you think the deficit that this will cause will never be able to recover from. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, we can't keep digging a hole. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Our debt is currently 36 trillion, and the interest we pay on it is over $1 trillion a year, which is more than we pay for the entire defense budget. This bill will increase that by all independent estimates, anywhere between 3.3 and $4.5 trillion in the coming years. So both the debt and the interest on it will continue to increase. Look, the unfortunate reality is that Republicans talk a good game when it comes to the debt and deficits, but then their actions are really tax cuts for rich people. And we saw this under Trump 1.0. We saw it under George W. Bush. We saw it under George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan. The trickle-down economics don't trickle down. And this is another example where, they really are putting in very regressive tax policies. According to the Penn-Wharton model, so, President Trump's alma mater, if you make more than $4.3 million a year, your tax bill will go down on average by $389,000. But if you make less than $51,000 a year, your tax bill will go up by $700. I mean, that's ridiculous. And moreover, the provisions in the bill that I actually think are good, the concepts anyway are good, like no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, and the increased SALT cap to 40 grand. Those are all temporary. Those basically run the duration of Trump's term, whereas the massive tax cuts for big corporations and the extremely wealthy, those are made permanent. So, it really is a terrible piece of legislation where they know that they can't pay for it. They know it's going to be a massive, massive hole. So to try to fill some of that hole, what they're doing is going after the most vulnerable in our society, cutting 17 million people off their health insurance, cutting millions more off their food assistance, and decimating the clean energy provisions that are actually leading to lower energy bills and hundreds of thousands of jobs, predominantly in the red states. So none of it makes much sense to me, other than they're trying to get something to Donald Trump's desk so he can claim a win, when the reality is it's a disaster for the American people, unless you're incredibly wealthy.
As you talk about people who will lose their health care access, for your own constituents who will lose access to Medicaid, what can you do for them? And have you been in touch with California Governor Gavin Newsom about helping this population?
Yeah, we've been talking to the governor and his team now for months as soon as we saw, what they were proposing. What I'll tell you is that Medicaid is getting all the attention, but it's not just about Medicaid. So there are real cuts, and they claim that it's just work requirements, but the Kaiser Family Foundation came out with an analysis that said 92% of the people who are going to be kicked off the rolls are people who are eligible for the care, but don't meet the new bureaucratic red tape. We know that when similar requirements were put in place in Arkansas and other states, that was, exactly what happened. People who were eligible for the care who just did not fill out the paperwork properly or did not get through the bureaucratic hurdles. So you will have people who deserve and need the help who aren't going to get it. But it's also about the Affordable Care Act, because they're taking away the all the progress that we made during COVID when we passed something called the American Rescue Plan. We put in place policies to reduce the cost of premiums for people trying to get their care through the Affordable Care Act exchanges. This bill, the big ugly bill, as I call it, the Republican budget, undoes that. So immediately the Affordable Care Act becomes a lot more expensive for people. So the independent estimates are that millions will be kicked off ACA, millions more will be kicked off Medicaid. But then it's also about Medicare. Because of that massive debt bomb that this is, the multi-trillion-dollar addition to the debt, that then triggers another $500 billion in mandatory cuts to Medicare. That means doctors will get paid less. That means patient care will decline in quality. And then the last thing is this issue of the provider tax. So in California and a lot of other states, the way Medicaid is funded is through a provider tax on hospitals and healthcare providers. The Republican budget bill decimates the ability to collect those same level of provider taxes, meaning you could have hospitals that shut down. And, we talked a lot about rural hospitals, but it's not just rural hospitals. It's suburban, it's urban. All hospitals that have a Medicaid population will be cut. And if you are on private insurance, if you don't have good hospital coverage, that impacts you. So it literally impacts every single person in America who has health insurance will be impacted by this bill in a negative way over time. And that is a massive failure by this administration, particularly when the president said that he would protect Medicare and Medicaid. He's doing the opposite with this.
You were right to mention SNAP benefits, and that brings up the question, again, on a state level, are there things that can be done to provide that which the federal government will no longer pay for once this bill goes into effect?
Well, that's what the Trump administration is banking on. So with regard to SNAP, they're going to stick the states with 25% of the bill, and some states will be able to afford it and some won't. It depends. In California, we're running a budget deficit, as I'm sure your viewers are aware, and so it makes it very difficult. And whether that's for healthcare or for food, but what I do know is how many of my constituents rely on SNAP just to get by. I live in a very expensive state, in a very expensive part of an expensive state, and you got people who are working, who are doing the best they can, but if they need the SNAP benefit just to be able to feed their kids, or if you're a senior and you need that just to get by, or a veteran and you need that to have enough to eat. I mean, for God's sake, why would we cut just the basic necessity of food, particularly for kids? When you invest in kids, there's really no better investment you can make than ensuring that that child has a positive learning environment and a decent quality of nutrition and enough to just make the basics work. When you invest in kids, the economic multiple of that is usually 6 or 7 to 1. I've seen studies even higher than that in terms of the long-term positive economic outcome for that child, their positive societal outcome. They pay more in taxes. Their rates of being involved with the criminal justice system go way down. So I just don't know how we could be any more dumb. And the administration could do anything dumber than cutting funding that help kids with better outcomes. It makes no sense.
If California has to step up and provide some of these benefits at the state level, will that involve raising taxes on Californians?
Well, for the administration, that's a feature, not a bug, right? I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. And in California, for a number of years, we're running surpluses. Our state revenue is very dependent on income taxes compared to some other states. So it's very volatile. The answer would be up to our friends in Sacramento to see, where we're at. But many other states are simply not going to have any other choice but to increase the level of taxes at the state level in order to fill the gap or dramatically cut the services. In either event, it's a loser for the residents for every state in the union.
Now, Congressman, you mentioned that behind closed doors, this bill is unpopular even with Republicans. So, to zoom out a little bit, does this mean that President Trump can just get whatever he wants until the midterms, perhaps?
Seems like it. That's the only conclusion I can reach, because when you hear people behind closed doors whose districts have massive Medicaid populations, for example, they know that their district is going to get absolutely hammered by this. They know it's wrong. They know it, and fundamentally, a lot of them know it's immoral to be taking away food from children or health care from seniors. And, it's insane. But then they do whatever Trump says. They also know Mike Johnson will not have their back if they do anything, to counter the president. So I will go on record saying that Mike Johnson is the weakest speaker in the modern history of the House of Representatives, because the rank and file members of the House Republican Conference have no confidence that if they stand up to this administration on anything, that the leadership of the House Republican Conference will have their back. In fact, they encourage a primary challenge. They know that if they stand up to Trump, regardless of what he proposes or what they disagree with, if they stand up to Trump, they are one true social post away from getting a primary, from being deemed insufficiently MAGA, and no one will come to their rescue in their leadership in the Republican Party.
So then the follow-up question to that is, what is next on the GOP agenda, and is there anything that could be done to stop it if it's as objectionable as you say this GOP budget bill is?
Well, next on the GOP agenda, we still have the September 30 deadline to fund the government. Otherwise, we're going to face a shutdown. I don't know, what their plan is, if they're, planning another continuing resolution, which is a very bad way to keep funding the government through continuing resolution. And as an appropriator, I take great offense to the way that House Republicans have just abdicated their constitutional responsibility to appropriate funds under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution. So, in my view, they need to step it up. They need to fund the government. They need to work with us in good faith to do so. And we can't keep doing CRs. In terms of the long view, the way I see it, Project 2029 starts as soon as that one big ugly bill is signed. What I mean by that is we've got to take back the House. We've got to take back the Senate in 2026. We've got to try to take back the White House in 2028. And we've got to reverse the damage that's being done. The good news about all this is it's being done by a simple majority vote via the budget reconciliation process, which means it can be undone with a simple majority vote via the budget reconciliation process. It's not the way to govern, but it is nonetheless a reality that we can undo all of this with a simple majority.
So if Democrats take back the House in 2026, is the first order of business undoing the big, beautiful bill?
Well, we'll have to see what other damage is done between now and then. But I think the absent having the White House, you're not going to be able to undo it, right? Because the president would just veto any measure sent to him to undo his signature legislative agenda. I would say being a check on this administration and making sure that they're actual co-equal branches of government again would be the first order of business. Real oversight, real accountability.
Now, on a practical matter, the vote for this bill will happen Thursday, the day that you and I are speaking. When will real Americans start to feel the effects?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because the way the bill is structured, some of the real pain may not happen for a year or two or longer, and that's by design. They've structured this bill where you get some of the sugar high right away, but you don't feel the real pain for a while, and that's just how they've designed it. And it's an incredibly cynical way to legislate, but that is what they've chosen to do. So I hope that the average American is smart enough to actually understand what this is going to mean for them, And that means that they're going to have to spend the time to understand it, or if nothing else, they're going to see higher prices. They're going to see, for example, energy prices go up. They're going to see higher taxes unless they're very wealthy. And ultimately, they're going to see that things like the no tax on tips really doesn't make sense for most of the people who are actually working and earning tips.
So there are 16 months between now and the midterm elections. Are you concerned at all that the part of the bill that's not the sugar high will have escaped public view by that point, that people will no longer be conscious of it?
I certainly hope that's not the case. We're going to do everything we can to communicate as effectively as we can in every venue we have to be able to explain the impacts of this bill. And of course, in today's media ecosystem, it's not easy, but we've got to continue to make the case as best we can.
Before I let you go, any final thoughts on this very busy news day about this very important budget bill?
Well, the last thing that I would mention is somebody that's been involved in the clean energy world, nonprofit and legal world, business world, is that this bill does extraordinary harm to all the progress that we're making to win the future as it pertains to the clean energy revolution. For me, this is you can say it's about the environment or about the climate. It's really about China and whether we're going to win or lose the long-term competition when it comes to the clean tech revolution. We were at least trying to compete with supply chain and incentives, and now we're just giving up. It seems like we're giving up, doubling down on the fossil fuel industry and making a huge strategic mistake. And look, I agree with Elon Musk on this one. This bill is basically investing in the industries of the past and doing everything possible to destroy the industries of the future.
Doing everything possible to destroy the industries of the future. Sobering words. Congressman Mike Levin, thank you so much for joining Forbes today. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thanks. Good to be with you.